guys? Whoops. Hold on. Let me fix that. There you go. Sorry, I was writing a thing. Hello, hello. How are you guys doing? Today is most definitely Friday. So, 'tis a stream night. Thank you. We're still going to get a new waiting screen. I haven't had the time to really just like do a lot of personal art, and Twitch most definitely counts as stuff I have to do my own time. So yeah, we're gonna see if I can get time to do that at some point in the next couple of months. But until then, we're just gonna have to make do. But yeah, how are you guys? How's it going? Took a break from writing this week? You did write a lot last week, didn't you? How many words are you at now? 14K, nice. Can't complain, school's kind of stressing me out. We're graduating soon, so I just gotta hold on. Yep. I feel like that's kind of how it is whenever you're graduating from something. It's ultimately just an endurance by the end. You're so close to the end that you don't really have the stamina to really put in your all as you've been doing, so you kind of just have to hope that you can make it till the finish line. I wish you luck. Hey Solus, how are you? Well, let's see. Just let you guys watch me do this for now. I was working up until like 30 minutes ago, so no time to make a stream announcement. I have a couple of homework assignments I gotta get started on. Hope you've had a good week. Thank goodness it's time for the weekend. Yeah, weekend is much, much appreciated. Thank you, thank you. creative. Do you have any tips on painting darker skin tones? I recently started painting more, and I feel like my darker skin tones don't have as much life as the lighter ones. A lot of people struggle with darker skin tones because they're often afraid to introduce either more saturation or more desaturation to their skin. Sometimes people will make the base skin tone for a person of color or a character of color. They'll set the skin tone as being way too desaturated, and then they won't add enough really dark warm tones back into it, so that areas where the blood is closer to the skin, despite the fact that the skin isn't as translucent, they don't put enough of it back in so that it doesn't feel as if there's like blood rushing through it. Likewise, if you have too warm of a skin tone but don't have enough kind of desaturated areas on the skin as skin normally does, especially in areas where it doesn't normally get flushed, so kind of like around the nostrils, in the far edges of the jaw, under the lips, between the eyes, right above the eyelids. Like, there are a lot of areas where skin does become a lot more desaturated, and it's harder for people to see those subtle differences in saturation, and so when they paint it a lot flatter than it should be. And honestly, the best way to remedy this is to actually look at photos of people with dark skin in different lighting. Especially for darker skin tones, their skin changes drastically depending on the ambient light around them. They, like, unlike lighter skin tones, they reflect a lot of that ambient light, so their highlights might end up looking a lot more saturated, a lot more desaturated, a lot more gray, depending on what kind of light source is on them, and you can make an executive stylistic choice about how you want to apply those colors and use them to, like, add, I guess, a creative choice to your color palette and lighting scheme. But again, best way to remedy that is to actually study photographs of darker skinned models, people in general, under different lighting sources. Until you do that, you won't really have a sense for how subtle these color changes can be, but then how crucial each subtle difference in saturation and tone and hue, is especially for darker skin tones. Painting ultimately is a lot about understanding the subtleties of color. I think a lot of people have like a preoccupation with emulating painting styles, that they don't really think about the colors and the tones that they're laying down, which are often, they go hand in hand with having a really beautiful brushstroke style, or having a really efficient way of painting objects. You also need to have an interesting way of representing objects through the colors that you pick, the values that you put down, the saturation that you choose. Depending on how you do that, your painting can come out looking very different. And part of what makes painting so difficult is that those color choices are hard baked into how you paint. So painting as much as you can from life, from photographs, from reference, learning and seeing how other people have kind of adapted reality, how they have interpreted reality in different ways. You know, what would make someone choose to paint something with extremely neon bright colors when there clearly isn't that kind of lighting visible, or what would compel a more realistic painter to really dull down saturation in certain areas but then hype up saturation in certain areas. Where do those choices take them? Why did they make those choices? Ultimately, what do those choices do for their art? That's only stuff you can really understand once you've experienced making those choices yourself. So always I recommend doing reference-based studies, photographs, or from life, preferably, because they will teach you so much more than a YouTube video or a random Twitch streamer could ever do for you. I hope part of what you learn is that you should be learning from many more sources than just whoever you watch on a Friday night. graciously accept this, what is it? Very gracious cookie that you're offering me. Core. How are you? It's 4 a.m. here, so I'm just passing by. Before I first message, I'm gonna say that I love your work and you're inspiring. Oh, well, I really appreciate you dropping by. Hope that perhaps I will have a stream at a much more convenient time for you. You know, the day that I start streaming at like normal morning times, that's when I'll have my life together. There are people who like get up at 7 or 8. It's crazy. Flipping the canvas is a very good practice. I've found that it helps me because I am very, very bad at drawing things straight or being able to flip things or mirror things. So especially for drawing faces, I flip a lot. But it's also just helpful to get like a new perspective on whatever you're drawing and helps me spot things faster. So in India, I got my life quite put together. It's pretty cool. Well, at least somewhere in the world I'm living with proper healthy habits. Which art school did or do you go to? Should be in the FAQ. I went to 2 different art schools, but only one did I spend most of my time in. First one was Savannah College of Art and Design in Georgia. Savannah, Georgia. And then the the second one, which I spent most of my time in, was Laguna College of Art and Design in California. Did I watch Arcane? You mean the show by Fortiche? Mean the wonderful, amazing, beautiful show made by Fortiche? The lovely, hard-working people who have done their best to bring Riot's very messy IP to fruition. That show? Yes, I did watch it, and I loved it. Well, love is an operative word. I don't really care about, like, League's lore. That's for people who actually, you know, like League. I am extremely, extremely happy that Fortiche is finally getting the love and praise that they deserve, because they should be getting more love and praise for all the times that Riot refuses to credit them for the work that they've done in previous music videos. Now that Fortiche can now brand Arcane with their lovely, beautiful studio name, I am extremely, extremely happy for them. And it looks fantastic. I think it's one of the best looking animated shows that has come out in a very long time. And I'm hopeful that perhaps Fortiche will be able to eventually release something on their own in the future. What's Fortiche? Fortiche is a French production company that single-handedly helped create the Arcane TV show that is based on the League of Legends lore and IP. They were pretty much one of the biggest people in terms of producing the show, so they did pretty much all of the animations. They were in charge of the art direction. They had a big role in influencing the character designs, the updated looks for all of the characters, and I don't know if they had other writers helping them, but you know, that might end up being Riot's thing. Let me post this real quick. TV. For some reason, they do not often get talked about, and one of my greatest fears is that people will watch Arcane and think that, or not know that Fortiche were the ones that put in the work, the hard work to make the equivalent of almost 2, maybe even potentially close to 3 feature-length films for an animated TV show. So I refuse to live in a world where I don't espouse the fact that Fortiche has done an incredible feat of creative endeavors and has really outdone themselves. So I look forward to watching the next episode just to see how incredible their process continues to be as they improve, because I can only assume that they built these episodes chronologically. I don't know if there are reasons for them to not be doing them chronologically, so if that's the case, then their later episodes are going to be Fortiche with their style down to a science, if they could be even more so down to a science. So I'm extraordinarily excited. Okay, so we have a headshot. Let's do that. Oops. If Fortiche wasn't making it, I wouldn't watch the show. But I have to support them. They are incredible visionaries for, I think, a new future for a very particular type of animation. I would love to see more projects. I want to support more projects of that type, even if ultimately all the credit will go to Riot. If that's the case, support. I think Six More Vodka recently closed out their exclusivity contract with Riot. They recently also shut down their longest running personal project, but Degenesis was their tabletop RPG or card, or I don't forget what it is. Basically a roleplay campaign project that they did. So if they still have that stuff online, you can definitely check it out. It's definitely been their personal project that they've had running since before they got into an exclusivity contract with Riot, and since they're now out, I don't know what they're going to be doing, but I hope that they're still kicking and that they're going to be making their own stuff. So if you're interested in potentially supporting something that is made by people who were once affiliated with Riot but are now working on their own things, potentially Six More Vodka is someone to keep an eye out for. Pretty much all the companies that Riot works with will inevitably be in an exclusivity contract with them. If you've heard of anything about Riot Forge is what Riot's currently doing. They are either buying out companies or creating exclusivity contracts with them so that they can only ever work on Riot property. Airship Syndicate is one of those. They are currently making the fighting game. The League fighting game, I believe. But before that, they were a development company that has made their own games. Now they are being contracted out to work on the League fighting game. Same with Fortiche, same with what was Six More Vodka. Six More Vodka was they were the ones that did predominantly most of the art for Legends of Runeterra before they closed out their contract. So you'll see that the predominant amount of art are sourced to artists that work at Six More Vodka. But now Riot has since been transitioning into pulling more artists out of third-party production houses, third-party contractor houses, work for hire, studios to help them keep up with the demand of Runeterra's card splash art workload. Very rarely does Riot do many of the things they do in-house. It's often just a lot more economical to have a workforce predominantly made of a core team within Riot and most of the work done outside of Riot headquarters. I don't know if you remember me, but I was with the people that came from Buzz Chat stream and asked you for advice for drawing. You told me to draw as much as I can. I drew a lot on paper. I felt myself getting better. I'm watching some videos to get better. I want to thank you for encouraging me. Hey, I am super glad that you took my advice to heart and that you're actually feeling like you're having fun. I think that's probably the hardest part, is to get people to recognize what is it they actually want to do, and if you're actually having fun with it, then that's the most important thing. I think a lot of people treat art like a form of punishment really early on. It does get really tough sometimes, but ultimately art is something that you should enjoy doing to some extent, if not enjoy utilizing to achieve something that you enjoy doing, whether that's storytelling, creating characters, creating worlds, anything like that. So if you're enjoying what you're doing, even if you know that you have a long way to go, that's really all that matters. So I am really happy to hear that. I feel like I meet far too many students nowadays that they're super ready to sacrifice all of those things because they feel like they have to in order to get better, but art can still be really fun as long as you let it. Thank you, Lime. I appreciate it. One day I will know where to place noses. No. He needs a nose. I'll probably draw it later, but he absolutely needs a nose. You know, I've tried that, and I can never seem to place the dot right. It's like trying to pin the tail on the donkey or whatever, like that old game that they used to have you play where you'd like get blindfolded and you have to pin it on the donkey's butt. Like I can never pin the nose right, and so it's always like too close under the eye, too far away, too high, too low, and I always end up repainting it once I get to like, you know, past the coloring stage. I might as well not try. Hydrate. I will drink. I have donk. FSL, thank you for the tier 1 sub. Oh my gosh, guys. Okay, if you live in Southern California, which is a very very small amount of people, I'm sure, that are here, there is a Hayao Miyazaki exhibit at the Academy Museum in LA. If you have not gone, and you can, you should. It is an incredibly beautiful exhibit. I cried like 5 separate times. But I think that might just be the reaction. It is really beautiful. It has a lot of the original concept pieces that Hayao Miyazaki made for all of his movies, including some of the background illustrations that were made by the Studio Ghibli team. Some of them, I believe, were made... Where is this book? I have one of the painter's books, although I don't know where it is. Maybe I put it somewhere. Oh no. Oga Kazuo? Some of his stuff is up there as well, and it is beautiful. So if you live near LA, I would definitely recommend checking it out. It goes up until June of next year. Yes, Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. It is quite a nice place. It's all about movies, specifically ones that have won Academy Awards, so I think that's why Miyazaki was there. Really messed up this hair. I'm really bad at like drawing super classic anime hairstyles. Like I always overcomplicate it and then it looks nothing like the hairstyle is supposed to be. This guy's supposed to have those like curtain bangs, and for some reason I've just like overcomplicated it so much that it does not look like curtain bangs. And now I have to figure out how I'm gonna salvage this so that it looks like curtain bangs. Woo. Yeah, I lived about an hour, 2-hour drive away, so it was very worth it. I went with a couple friends of mine, and it was a really good day. Expensive, for sure, but otherwise an excellent day. Still does not look like it. I noticed that a lot of really good artists have a slow tempo when drawing, but also end up reaching a finished piece much quicker. It makes me think maybe I don't think as much as I should when I draw. Occasionally. I mean, I think there are many different ways to approach drawing. Ultimately, you end up in the same place where all that really matters is that you draw with intent. That doesn't necessarily mean drawing and thinking ahead while you're placing lines. Some people are the type of people that find the drawing through line work. Especially with artists that struggle to envision something in their head or imagine stuff, they will occasionally use the act of drawing to find out what they're drawing. But even with that, you kind of make executive decisions as you're putting down lines, and I think that's why you might often find artists drawing a lot slower than you might think that they do, or think that they should, depending on how fast they end up finishing the piece. It does ultimately come down to having less reasons to rehash or go over the same idea, oftentimes because they have had enough experience, are comfortable enough with the subject matter, that they can usually more efficiently communicate things, and the more experienced they are, the more and more there is that they're comfortable communicating in pretty easy, quick ways, because they're used to it. They've developed a muscle memory for it, and they've developed a sense for it that's more subconscious and doesn't require them to think nearly as much, so that they can, focus their energy more on stuff that's actually really complex. That could be anything from really intricate scenes like Kim Jong-gi does. It could be the overall composition of a piece. That could be a mood, an atmosphere. It could be a target silhouette, even though you don't necessarily know what the design's going to look like. Those things are more complicated. It's difficult to come up with those things at the same time while you're trying to also execute on a drawing. And that's usually where artists will have to revise quite often, and that adds up when it comes to how fast it takes them, or how much time it takes them to finish something. I think thinking is one thing, intent is another. Being intentional and purposeful about where you put your lines and what kind of information you're trying to communicate. That is, I think, usually what is the hallmark of a very skilled and thoughtful artist. Thoughtful draftsman. If you could go back to the past, to when will you go back? My friend said he would go back to Adam and Eve and stop eating the apple. I don't really think I want to go back in time. I'm pretty comfortable where I'm at. I like technology. And I like modern times. I don't really want to live in times before, the idea of hygiene, the idea of easily accessible or more accessible scientific I guess developments in medicine and healthcare. Maybe I'd go back to like last year and take like none of the projects that I took on like at the end of the year, because the first half of this year was so busy. I'm still reeling from it. I'm still feeling it. I'm still feeling the burnout. Maybe I'd do that if I could take the knowledge that I have. Your shape language and the hair and clothing is so beautifully interesting. What are the things you think about when creating those types of shapes? Or is the type of intuition you gain just from drawing for another time, or you both? So I have very specific tastes in artists that I think have really influenced my preferences when it comes to shapes, especially for hair and clothing. Alphonse Mucha is one of them. And JC Leyendecker is another. Sergio Tappi is another. And so, you know, once you take a bunch of the artists that I really like and you put them all together, you'll see why I tend to draw my lines a certain way. At this point, it's sort of just muscle memory and instinct. But it's definitely the product of the artists that I've really come to appreciate and look up to when it comes to their stylistic achievements. What is your music of choice while working like a certain genre or some YouTube channel music that you like? And what is currently playing sounds soothing and chill? What is currently playing is Bending the Rules by Chow Sarah. That's what's currently playing. But I tend to listen to a variety of things. I actually really like playing a lot more upbeat songs. I currently am listening to a variety of indie pop and K-pop, but occasionally I'll dip back into like musicals and stuff like that. I don't know, I tend to listen to more hype music because it's my personal preference. I don't tend to listen to like chill lo-fi stuff unless I'm writing something or I'm streaming. Because I tend to zone out a lot when I am drawing, and so that kind of background energy is something I prefer to have. Favorite song right now? Let's see, what have I played recently? So I found this recently, but Panic Room by Aura is pretty good. I didn't know about her up until a couple days ago, but it's a pretty cool song. Hey Crocopo! Tried your course about a year ago. I really enjoyed some of the lessons, but I didn't feel confident in my ability to do some of the assignments after spending a lot of time trying to get better. I'm going to go back and finish it. Awesome! Well, I'm glad you are trying again. I think there is often a time and place for art education, and sometimes you're just kind of not ready for it. But it's always good to give it another shot and try again. I always find that the second time around, when I'm struggling to learn something, or get something right, usually ends up being a lot more fruitful, if not more successful, than my first attempt. So I'm really glad to hear that you're going to give it another shot. We rewatch the course after the course time is over. You have a limited time to access the course. At least that was the intention. I don't think anyone's been kicked from the class yet. But during your access to the class, you can have as many rewatches as you want. Question, will you perhaps do an anatomy class in the future? I don't necessarily feel like I am actually a good resource when it comes to anatomy. I have a basic understanding, a working understanding, and it's enough to get me by. But there are people that actually have a much better grasp on anatomy that I think would be much better teachers. My anatomy kind of crash course in the class was meant to only be a refresher for people if they needed it. It's not meant to be overly educational. If it's not working, you can also just look for me using the name, my Twitch name, because it's all the same. Any recommendations? I mean, if you look on YouTube, there are plenty of anatomy courses on there that are for free. I'd say utilize free resources when you can. There are also anatomy references. I think there's literally a account called Anatomy for Sculptors. They kind of go a little bit in depth, but you can see if any of their guides are helpful when it comes to really small tips and tricks with specific things like the skin around the eye or specific, structures in the hand or something like that. There are things like Proco. There are I think if you really want to pay for stuff, there's stuff like Gumroad and Patreon, but I think YouTube is the better place to start. I think you can find pretty much all the information you need from YouTube. And Drosh, yes. Drosh, I think, is my personal recommendation because I love Josh Reed. He is a close friend of mine. Close friend. He's a friend of mine. I haven't talked to him in a while, but he has my wholehearted love, adoration, and support. So if you want to follow up on a guy who really knows his stuff, Drosh is an excellent resource. Yes. It's a combination between Draw and Josh, which is his name. He's had Drosh as a blogspot website for as long as I can remember. And he's the one who originally taught me anatomy. So, if there's anyone to listen to, it's him. What brushes do you use, or are they customized by you? So I use an amalgamation of brushes. I am a brush hoarder. I really like purchasing brushes even if I don't need them. It's like a hobby. So I have a lot of brushes that I honestly don't use. If you are a sub, you can go and get some of my more currently used brushes for free on the Discord that we all have. And if you are a sub, you just need to connect your Twitch account to your Discord. Otherwise, there's a Gumroad that has my brushes on there. Free to buy. But yeah, I only use a couple of brushes quite often. And some of them I've customized, some of them I've made, some of them I've purchased. So it's usually a mixed bag. Yes, Peach? Peach sneezed. Tips on achieving rough painterly brushwork. I have a tendency to smoothly render stuff, but for the rougher look. That could be a brush thing. That could be a technique thing. I'd say if you have an artist that has a preference for, or if you have an artist that you like whose brushwork you enjoy, you could see how they do it. Some artists are really good at replicating rough brushwork with really simple, round brushes, and some of them use textured brushes or even the mixer brush to create the rough texture work. So I'd say in this case, brush type does really matter. If you have a preferred artist that you like but you don't know what type of brushes they use, I could potentially help you if you link them to me, but in this case there is a mixture of the two. A lot of the times it's about not over blending, not using too much of an airbrush or any super soft edges, really controlling where you keep things rough and unpolished and where you do polish things so that you add that necessary contrast. A lot of people recommend doing traditional painting as a way to kind of help you figure that out, because it's really hard to learn how to properly paint if you only have ever done digital painting. There's a kind of technique that you only really practice and learn through the act of painting traditionally. So a lot of people recommend actually learning how to interact with paints in a more physical way, and then you can better know how to transfer that feeling to digital work. Miss Peach? Oh, she's leaving. She's leaving me. That's because I change up which brush I use. This time I'm using my little classic little square brush that looks like that. Just because I was feeling a little bit more texture, but sometimes I don't use a brush with texture at all. Sometimes I use one that's much more flat and almost like sharp in a way. Depends on what I'm feeling that day. How do you think about placing the lines? Do you astral project every single line? Sometimes and sometimes not. There are times when I do have an idea for where I want to take a certain drawing or certain pose or certain expression, and then I will kind of look towards, where should I be placing these lines to achieve that. Sometimes I'm kind of just making a complete winged guess. I'm just saying, I don't really have an idea, I'm just gonna draw some things out, and at one point I'll pick a line where I'm like, okay, making that line was kind of a soft decision, and now I kind of have to work with that decision. That's usually where some level of spontaneity comes from when I draw things, and it's kind of a challenge because I sometimes don't know where a drawing's going until, one fateful decision. So there are times where I'm definitely thinking ahead, and then sometimes where I am not. What resolution and canvas size do you work on? Because most of the time my line work gets pixelated. I work on at least 11 by 17 at 300 dpi. 11 by 17 inches. Because that is a good size to work at if you ever end up wanting to print something. Even if you don't, I think it's a good size to work with, because you get enough resolution and enough, canvas to make whatever you want out of it. You can elongate it, you can make it taller or wider, but I never make it smaller than that unless, it's for stuff like this, like headshots, where I'll just cut it in half. I try not to draw smaller than that because I think it's a really good basic size for stuff. So yes, it might be your resolution. You might be drawing at 72 dpi, or it could be the canvas size. Anything smaller than, what is real life measurements. Anything at 300 dpi will be printing size, so if you set something to a certain size at 300 dpi, you can expect that to be the size it will be if it's printed. So you get a good idea for if you take an average piece of paper that's 8.5 by 11 inches, and you draw something on Photoshop or something like that, you'll know what size it looks like when it gets printed out. You'll know at what point when you zoom in does it get pixelated. So it's good to have a size that you use as a base for all of your drawings. Remind me not to forget about his glasses, because I think I might. noche. Maybe a dumb question I'm asking anyways. Building up your knowledge and eye for color, just something you build up over time, or do you just keep doing color studies or different things so you can spot this little change? It's both. It'll take you much longer to grasp unless you've done dedicated studies, but it is also something that you over time grow to be more sensitive to. I'd say it's better to kind of actively learn things as opposed to just allowing yourself to slowly accumulate the information. It's kind of like, okay, well, maybe this isn't a great example if you don't play Animal Crossing, but if you play Animal Crossing and you have a project going on in the town, sometimes your villagers will put like 100 bells into the project, and it's like 100k bells, right? But if you just kind of wait for them to pay for it, it'll take them like a year, 2 years, 3 years to get there. Or you could be purposeful, take your own money and put it in and invest in it yourself, and you could get that project done way faster. It's the same idea. Artists tend to slowly accumulate information as they get older, as they become more experienced, as they come across new artists, face new challenges, get put on new projects. You learn things subconsciously, just as much as you do consciously. But I think you learn a lot of things much more deeply and in a way that is a lot more impactful if you have done and put in the effort to learn them purposefully. So sitting down and doing those color studies, really looking at reading about and really accumulating that knowledge, I think is going to stick with you in a much better way if you put in the time to learn about it. Are Photoshop's color bucket tool really bad, as in it doesn't recognize slightly unclosed lines? It is really bad. It's why I typically use Clip Studio Paint when it comes to flat coloring, because Clip Studio does tend to recognize these open lines. But I'm just lazy to open Clip Studio, so I'm just going to do it by hand. I will say doing it by hand often is cleaner, because what Clip Studio does is leave gaps between the unclosed lines, or leave gaps where your line art is. They have tools to kind of close those gaps as well, but they're not perfect, and so sometimes you can end up with a pretty messy base color layer that sometimes just hand coloring it in won't leave. That being said, so much slower. Almost arguably not worth it, even with that slight, caveat. But I'm just lazy, so I'm gonna do it this way. Trying to really dial in on my lines, improve my draftsmanship. Color is a little on the side, but I definitely need to do some studies when I get the time, because I hard struggle and have to render things out. Yeah, it's tough to do both at the same time, and generally I think people, they tend to divide out what they can focus on at any given point in time. So it'll always be kind of a push and pull for sure. I spent a really long time, a couple years, just painting, and so my painting definitely got better, but my line work was still kind of shaky. And then when I started getting better at line work, I suddenly didn't know how to paint, really. So there's definitely a back and forth with that. Whenever you started something new, like the first time you started painting maybe was it daunting? What did you do to help with that? If so. When I first started painting, it was scary, but the reason why I started painting was because I got fed up with clean line art. I think at the time I had a pretty big kind of, I don't know, it was kind of a sore spot because I felt like all of my favorite artists at the time, a lot of whom were just, you know, anime artists, it was kind of like the thing to have clean line art and really clean, you know, really clean coloring and stuff, and I just couldn't get it. So when I started painting, it was kind of just me forcefully trying to work through it, and I think I might have just been too angry at the time to recognize how uncomfortable it was at first, because I don't really remember much outside of just needing it to work. I was kind of on and off experimenting with painting, with not using line art, with just going straight into putting down color. Blobbing is sometimes a technique some people do, where they just blob color and then just find a painting out of that. I was doing all sorts of stuff because I was getting really sick and tired of drawing, funnily enough. And so, you know, I think it was kind of more of a different situation, but it is scary. It's always, I think, really nerve-wracking to get into anything that is particularly different or new, when it comes to your process or your comfort zone. And ultimately, how you get through it is just pacing yourself through the process, you know, keeping your eyes on artists that you really like, who seem to have a really good grasp on it, finding out the weak points in your style or execution, and trying to figure out, you know, what are the weak spots. Is it my colors are really muddy? Is it that you know, I don't have a good sense for lighting? Is it that, you know, there's a better process for this and I'm getting too into detail too fast, too early? The you know, more you can break it down into sizable, digestible chunks, the easier it is to kind of jump into new things. When do you think practicing to becoming good at craftsmanship is right, or like anyone can do it at any time? By the way, I'm 16. It's not so much age, it's more about, honestly, just when you feel like you want to start improving on it, you can. I think, there is definitely a time when it's a little early, and that's usually when I'd say, if you're still just kind of trying to figure out how to draw things, if you're not all that well versed in, like you just haven't been drawing for that long, if you still kind of struggle to communicate basic ideas like drawing a character with clothes on, drawing a character with facial features or expressions, and it doesn't even have to be good, it just has to be the fact that you can draw it. Because once you know how to apply certain things, like being able to draw objects, then you can look at being able to draw them in a, purposeful, stylistic manner, being able to communicate them more efficiently, better. But you can't do that without having, experienced the act of and the comfort of drawing for at least a certain amount of time. Being comfortable with drawing is not something you can replace by excessive learning or studying. That's something you can only gain through time and experience and practice, and that is usually what will make it easier or more difficult to learn something or become comfortable with something. And draftsmanship, I think, has always been a matter of comfort. It's always been something that you learn once you have a certain amount of experience just kind of drawing the stuff. And then you can worry about, the style in which, or the type of execution in which you draw something. But, that isn't to say that you can't make that decision for yourself. If you feel like you wanted to give it a try, if you want to start learning about it, you can. I feel like there's never really a limit to when you can do stuff. Just understand that sometimes you might not be ready to learn something, might not be ready to tackle a certain problem. I think a lot of issues that people sometimes hit when they try to get into character design, especially if they have only really just started to draw, is that character design is a design, genre. It's in a very specific subgenre of art. Design is a very specific skill set. And until you have a good grasp on how to execute, design is nearly impossible to really focus on and perfect. Especially if you're in classes that teach design, but you are unable to really, draw the ideas you're having. No teacher is really going to be able to ignore the fact that your designs are unable to be communicated because, the skill set that it's being drawn with does not really communicate it faithfully. So your designs suffer as a result of a lack of comfort, a lack of kind of visible understanding of foundations, and that can detract from the efficacy of your design. Even if the idea there, even if the concept behind it is perfectly sound and perhaps even interesting, execution affects everything that artists do. It is essentially what art style is. It's essentially how designers have their work judged by the vast majority of people who are going to be looking at our designs, which is typically by non-creatives. And so we do have to think a lot about execution. And whether or not you're prepared to start thinking about execution, which is in essence draftsmanship, is ultimately up to you. Do you find yourself using the liquefy tool a lot less as you've become more experienced, or is the deformation of what you see going to stick with you forever as in it looks off? I think I will always probably have something off about what I draw. I often struggle a lot with, I I think, in particular, drawing certain things the first time, especially like anime pretty people. I really struggle drawing attractive people. And I typically find myself wanting to edit it a lot, and going back and fixing it makes me feel better because I don't ever think I can get it right the first time. So in those instances, I tend to use Liquify Tool a lot. In other circumstances, I sometimes don't use Liquify Tool at all, and that's often because, it's less about things I'm particularly insecure about. If I'm drawing something for myself, drawing things that I'm particularly comfortable with drawing, then I often don't use the Liquify Tool because I have a better sense for it. But with things that I am insecure about, all the time. All the freaking time. I don't know what piece you're talking about, because I think you linked it and it got blocked. Could you tell me what the name is? Or if you can send the link to my mod, you can also potentially. Miss Peach? I'm glad my voice is soothing. I know this makes sense, but how do you become more patient with yourself? The way you draw feels gentle to watch, but I feel like I rush with my coloring and lines, but at the same time, I'm also very slow when it comes to actually finishing a piece. So I think that's a very real problem. Rushing is something that we all do when we feel like a multitude of things, right? When you feel like you don't really understand what you're doing, you're kind of in a rush because you feel like, okay, if I just get this over with, maybe I can get to something I actually feel confident in doing. Or, you're kind of impatient because it's frustrating. You feel like, it just doesn't seem to be clicking, and as you get more and more frustrated, you get faster and faster, and you end up finishing it, but it felt like it took years, and ultimately it doesn't even look that good. There are a lot of reasons why people rush. Oftentimes we rush when we're uncomfortable with what we're drawing, because we're not experienced enough yet, we don't have a good sense for it yet, but, ultimately ends up looking the same. You usually don't really like it all that much, and you don't understand why. I think that when it comes to patience, it's a lot of forced. It's more of like a forced thing. Like, I had to tell myself that I was rushing before. Because I think I'd always been very preoccupied with speed. I thought speed made me a better artist because I thought that good artists drew fast. So to me, it meant that, you know, I made a false kind of equivalency. It was like, oh, well, if good artists draw fast, and if I draw fast, I'll be a better artist. It's not true. I think a lot of good artists tend to draw faster because they are more confident in what they're drawing. That doesn't necessarily mean speed, it just means efficiency. And in doing so, some of them slow down quite a bit. They take a lot more time to think about what they're drawing. They spend less time making mistakes that could have been avoided if they just slowed down a little bit. I think it gives them a little bit more time to really think through what they're drawing, if they're the kind of person that does that. So, you know, I don't think it's necessarily... It is kind of something that you grow into doing, but for me personally, it was something I had to force myself to come to terms with. I had to force myself to realize that I drew way too fast, that I was way too impatient for the wrong reasons, and that it wasn't helping me by, you know, trying to rush through something. I didn't like rendering because I thought it took too long. I was already kind of over the drawing by the time I got to rendering, because I was like, oh, the exciting part's over. But I had to. It was my job to learn how to slow down and really, you know, look at the piece and take a, you know, honest step back and evaluate it with, you know, discerning eyes, and not try to just treat it like something I could quickly do and then throw away. That's all well and good for stuff I do on my own time, but especially once I started working professionally, learning how to push yourself to take the time to do something with effort and genuine kind of, I guess, concern and care, that's stuff you kind of learn to do. I think as I get older, though, I do tend to be more patient. I think because I've started to recognize how methodical art really is for me, at least. I think I've started to really appreciate the time in between starting and finishing a drawing a lot more than I used to. I think I stopped caring about finishing stuff because the time I spent in between the beginning and end became a lot more interesting to me. I really like finding things during the drawing process, especially when I'm designing a character. I think it's a lot more fun to kind of spend that time talking to them, spend that time thinking about them, dreaming about who they are, how they act, the facts and the aspects of their life, how they interact with the world, bits and pieces about their world that factor into who they are. I talk to them, they talk to me, I try to live through them a little bit. It makes their design a little bit more authentic, and that's really cool and fun for me, at least when I do character design. When I'm drawing anything else, I'm usually doing something very similar. I am often inventing something about the character in my head, even though, you know, maybe they don't belong to me, maybe it's for a project or a client. But drawing has definitely become much slower as I've gotten used to kind of forcing myself to slow down. And now I don't have to force myself to do that anymore, because now I do it intentionally. And I don't necessarily think it's the hallmark of a better artist or a good artist. I think it just, for some people, is the speed in which we settle. I've settled for now in the speed, in the manner that I draw, because there's other stuff I'm usually doing while I'm drawing. I'm not just making lines, I'm making decisions. I'm trying to decide things like, where is the light coming from? Do I want the shadow to be thicker, more impactful? Do I want it to stand out in an area that doesn't have a lot of other shadows and isn't, you know, grouped with everything else? Is that an executive choice I want to make? Is there, you know, something I can do that is a lot more subtle? Do I want to go more subtle? Those are the things I'm thinking about while I'm drawing. and there are a lot of thoughts happening there because I tend to overthink, and that means that I tend to take a while nowadays. I'm not as fast as I used to be because I don't really feel like it. But I guess ultimately, to answer your question, how do you become more patient? Giving yourself the time to sort of really live through a specific drawing, telling yourself to slow down, practicing it, enforcing it, really pushing yourself to see the value in it. If it's something that ultimately is beneficial for you, then you'll see that it changes it has an effect on how you draw things and how it ends up, turning out. That kind of stuff you can only really do and learn through practice. And so if you're someone that really wants to learn patience, that really wants to learn having that kind of patience with your art, it ultimately comes from wanting to develop, I guess, a more methodical perspective with drawing. There was a raid. Guilo, thank you for the raid with Party of 5. Thank you so much. I hope your stream went well. I think you're streaming. But thank you so much. Okay, so this piece was done on Rebel, I think. It's a very specific program. It's not Photoshop. So if you want to paint with brushes like that, I don't know what the equivalent brush set would be for Photoshop because that wasn't done in Photoshop. The program is called Rebel with 2 L's and an E at the end, and it is a program meant to emulate oil painting. There are quite a few programs like that out there, but I was just testing it out for fun. But yeah, was not done in Photoshop, so I could not help you find duplicate brushes like that in a different program. Yes, I will need to add glasses. I heard Proko saying in a video that drawing something loosely and quickly is a skill developed by drawing something slowly and carefully. It really put me in a place. Yeah, I'd agree with that. Sorry, I just missed something that sounded... Were you talking about how there's no real way to study design like you can with drawing? I think design is special. You can study design, but it doesn't really end up with any ultimate truths. I think beyond, for me personally, a few, but ultimately design is extremely personal and extremely up to your own tastes and your own preferences. I think there are ways to study design, but I think ultimately what comes out of those studies is different for everyone. That's why it's difficult, because not everyone's going to agree with your preferences. Not everyone's going to agree with your definition of cool or interesting, or even just what is good and efficient or stylistically appealing. But it wasn't necessarily a conversation on design as it was... Actually, I don't even know what that thread was coming from. It's gone. It's in the wind. I don't remember. Yeah, I also struggle with making loose designs, or loose art. I have been trying to recently to put an effort more into making art that's a lot less tight, a lot less, I guess, like, polished. I think I'm growing tired of it. And in fact, actually, going to the Ghibli exhibit really hammered that in home for me, because Hayao Miyazaki's a fascinating artist. He's He's made such an impact on people's lives, and yet, if you really look at his art, he's not the best draftsman, and he's not the best character designer. Not that he has to be, because I think his medium and his expertise is elsewhere, but there's still something about his art that is so different. It has such a unique and genuine and honest feel to it that you don't see in the art that's made for other productions. It's not the same as concept art. He's not doing character design. He's not making concept. He's not making pre-production pieces for his movie. When you look at his concept pieces and you look at his beginning illustrations that he makes before he, officially sets, or writes out the movie, it's an honest to God, just exploration of his characters and their stories. And they're not tied down drawings. They're not well rendered. They're not masterfully done. They are just real and genuine expressions of love for these characters that he's creating, because these characters to him, ultimately, they are humans. They are actual living people with contradictions and problems that are, attempting to rise above whatever challenge they face, and he treats them with that kind of respect. And that's not something you see in a lot of commercial pieces nowadays. That's not something you see when someone teaches you character design, because it's not really what other productions are about. It's not really the place for that kind of honesty. But he can do it because it's his movie. He can make those decisions and be that kind of director, because it's his story that he's telling. But it's fascinating seeing it in person, which is why I cried going to the exhibit, because I'm gonna cry now too. Oh god. I don't think I've seen an artist recently who's like that. I don't think I've seen art like that on ArtStation or Twitter or Instagram. There's no one like that right now who's making real, it's actually his life's work. You look at it and you see a genuine expression of someone's ideas, of someone's characters. And there's no way to quantify it except the fact that it's so heartfelt. It's not just a fictional character that he's designing. It means something to him. It means something to the story that he's writing. And I think that's why his movies reached so many people. It's why it's been such an important hallmark for a lot of people's childhoods or even their creative development. There's something very magical about his work that's not just him setting it in a pretty forest with nice art in the background. It's not just he has movies that are in an interesting genre or an interesting time period. And because his work spans multiple different genres. It's slice of life, it's slightly historical, it's slightly fantastical. It's a mix of the two. It's a war film. It's almost like a biopic. There's so many different genres that he goes into, but his treatment of his characters ultimately are the same. He is meditating on who they are, how they live, they're really humanistic, honestly, philosophies, and it was, I don't know, it was really nice to see, because when you work in production, when you work for commercial projects or even on your own projects, you don't think about stuff like that. You think about it as portfolio pieces, you think about it as resumes, you think about it like, oh yeah, this has to be 3D modeled by someone, so this character design has to look good from all sorts of angles. He doesn't think like that. He doesn't have to. Hayao Miyazaki is he's just a different kind of artist. I think one that, I mean, he's an extremely complicated man, a terrible father for one, a kind of mean old man for another. But I think from the perspective of an artist and incredible storyteller that has such an honest and genuine way of communicating his ideas, and you can just really feel it when you see his stuff. Anyways, I'm gonna cry. So, anyways, yeah, it's great. Love his stuff. His stuff's good. Not even polished. He's not the best draftsman, not even the best character designer, but it works. His stuff is great. And I would really love to know how to do that, because I feel like I spend too long polishing things. Design truths. So when it comes to design, I think I've always been particularly drawn to a couple of things, and these are my personal preferences. I think good design usually comes from having a really strong sense for a bunch of things at the same time. One of them is silhouette. Another one is movement, internal rhythm, flow, that kind of thing. Another one is a sense for storytelling, being able to even hint that there is a little bit more to this character than maybe you know, or maybe that meets the eye. Something that they're wearing, or what they are holding, or what they have on them, or how they are posed, says something more about them. And, you know, honestly, after that, it's kind of just like execution and style. All of these things kind of working together to create one really solid character design. I think, you know, a good design often has a really striking silhouette or a really interesting silhouette. Not to say that characters with boring silhouettes can't be good character designs, but I think for me, even boring characters can be interesting in some way. And it's not just because, you know, maybe they're in an IP that's interesting or they have an interesting story. In that way, I don't necessarily think a lot of the most iconic shows or characters out there are actually all that well designed. I think they're perfectly good designs for what they are for. That doesn't necessarily mean I think they are iconic designs on their own. But for me, a good design is one that is well crafted, one that is made with a lot of intention. They wear things or hold things or possess things which help you as the viewer, even if you don't know anything about them, understand you know, who they are, where they're going, where they come from, their culture, and or their current state of being. You learn that there's a mystery to them that you want to understand, and that, you know, maybe there's more to this character than meets the eye. I think a good character design has to be executed in a way that is purposeful. I think it's at least for me, I can usually tell when I think the person does not have a full grasp on how they want to execute something, and so ultimately what it feels like is a design that is attempting to be executed properly, but is still kind of struggling from maybe slightly soft fundamentals and a little bit unsure kind of execution. I think designs live somewhere. They live somewhere on the stylistic spectrum. And how you execute something from a stylistic perspective does impact the efficacy of a design. It does impact, you know, how you receive it, how you might, you know, potentially judge where the character comes from, the project that they're in, the space that they inhabit. So, you know, it's like would like a Dark Souls character wouldn't feel the same if you executed them like some Cartoon Network show, right? Same thing with Persona 5 is almost entirely held together by its stylistic presence. Functionally, that game does not have terribly interesting or wildly outstanding designs, nor does it have wildly outstanding concepts behind those designs. But if you really look at how the whole game is just tied together by such a strong like design direction, that's when it gives itself its own identity, it gives itself its own life. And it helps everything else feel a lot more cohesive and feel a lot more like it just feels like it all belongs in the same world, one that has a lot more to offer you if you just care to look a little bit deeper. So there are a couple things that I think most good designs have, and a lot of designs tend to have a couple of those things, maybe some, maybe none. And you know, how I judge designs is not necessarily I guess it doesn't necessarily mean that a design is better than another. It just means that I personally think it's more interesting than you know, another interpretation of the same concept. And when I don't like a design, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. I think it usually just falls short of what I think it could have been. The exhibit is Hayao Miyazaki. I don't exactly know what the name is, but it's in the Academy Museum in LA. It leaves June 5th or 2nd, 2022, so you have about until June to go see it. And I highly, highly recommend you go see it if you can. The Wayfinder. Oh. What brushes did I use for that one? I don't even remember. Let me see. Let me take a gander. This one seems to be an amalgamation of some of my texture brushes. I don't know if I could actually pull out the ones that I think I used. I'll have to see. I think some of them might be in the packs that... No, not that one. Some of them might be in the packs that I posted for subs, but... the majority of those is honestly just a variety of... not hard, well, I guess a little bit, pen pressure sensitive opacity brushes with a variety of like outer rim textures, and that's usually ultimately what makes those brushes. I think they might also have a dual texture feature on them, but I don't really know if I could name what brushes I used for that specific piece. But I think it was only really 2 brushes for that one. Maybe 3? Okay, if you've been asked before, what's some of your favorite character designs in media? I really like the designs from Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, which is the spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio. I think Team Reptile has some fantastic character designers. Maybe even one character designer, and that game is just beautiful. It's super charming to look at. I think they have some really good characters too in their other game, Lethal League. really just some super charming characters that really just gets back to the whole, I guess, fun part of character design, which is bombastic silhouettes that are cute and charming and perfectly fun with no need to, you know, be functional or realistic or, you know, just utilitarian in any way. Working in the West means that a lot of the designs I have to make are very extremely functional or utilitarian, or they're, you know, people just draw horny people. But Bomber Cyberpunk has some extremely charming designs, and I think their characters are some of my favorites. Other characters, I don't have a ton that I would really say that I love a whole lot. I'd say who else? Character designers? I don't know. It's hard to say. I tend to like the execution more than I like the design. How do you know when you're done exploring and you can move forward to the next step? Honestly, you never really know when to make the call, and you're just gonna have to hope that, you know, once you feel like you're done and you feel like you have made all of the ideas that you can and you've exhausted your avenues and you're the only one looking at your project, you can only really hope that you're making the right decision when you choose to move forward. I think ultimately there is always more to do, more things that you could ideate on, more ideas to potentially bring to the table, but we're not usually, you know, like that's usually why character designs are often done by a team or looked at by a team, because as one person you can't cover all your bases, you can't think of all the ideas. So if it's just you and you are, you know, struggling to figure out how many more ideas you can try out, that might be the sign to start experimenting and starting to move to the next stage. You know, as you get older and you revisit projects, you might realize like, oh, I totally missed out on exploring this one thing, and that's totally fine. Sean, thank you for the raid. Hope your stream went well. But yeah, sometimes you just kind of have to make the executive decision that like, okay, I think I've experimented and concepted for all of the things I think I can for this character, and now I'm going to move on. I think being able to make that call is very important. What's your take on grind culture in the artist community? I think it's stupid. Not that the people are stupid for doing it, but I think it is a extremely delicate, or should be a very delicate thing, because I think it's really easy to get into because it feels like something that everyone is super down for. Like, oh yeah, of course, why wouldn't I want to be a part of a super motivated art community where the people I'm talking to are also super motivated, and they're not just going to be like everyone else. They're going to actually be dedicated artists who really care about what they're learning, and we're all going to be working together, and it's going to be like this one big friend group. Like, that sounds amazing. That sounds like what everyone wants, you know, college to be. That sounds like what everyone wants their, you know, immediate friend group to be if they're an artist. But I've found that a lot of those groups tend to foster either a type of personality or a type of kind of perspective that could snowball into something really dangerous, potentially toxic, and potentially unhealthy. And I've kind of, I mean, I have a whole rant about grind culture in my class, but basically, I think that it is something that you have to be extremely aware of when you get into. I don't necessarily think the idea of pushing yourself and keeping yourself accountable and, actively trying to improve and seeking out resources in which to do that is a bad thing. I think that, if someone is doing it in a responsible way, it's actually quite admirable that people are willing to, really regiment themselves to do it. But I've discovered that not a ton of people really take into consideration what is actually happening when they get too deep into it, and they don't recognize they don't recognize what it's doing to them. They don't recognize what it's doing to their subconscious relationship with art, with their work. And I've seen quite a few people burn out in a way that is kind of unique to grinding, in which they have an extremely warped perception of what art is. They see it as a grueling challenge that they have no choice but to participate in, because to not participate in it and not participate in this extremely punishing, almost self-flagellating exercise, to not always be grinding, to not always be productive, is something to be ashamed of. It almost promotes occasionally a sense of self-loathing and guilt tripping. I think a lot of these groups, they want to foster an environment where people feel motivated because, you don't want to miss out, you don't want to fall behind, you don't want to, you want to be moving forward with the group, you want to share your experience, you want to be a part of the journey with other people, because it's scary to do it alone. But sometimes what ends up happening is that it becomes less about the art and more about making sure that you don't get excluded from the group. Some of these groups end up having, really intense regimens. They tell people you have to post every day, or you have to, do this study, or set your own schedule and follow it every day or follow it every week. And at what point do people start just posting to make sure they don't get kicked out from the grind group? When does it end up being just they end up making a study or a drawing or a painting because they have to meet their quota for the week or the month or for the goal? And it's a lot less about having a good time with art, really enjoying the process, really learning in a way that isn't like, under threat. I don't know. I really find find grind culture to be kind of a toxic experience for me, and I've never really understood treating art that way. I think it's good to be responsible, and it's good to know when, you should be kind of kicking yourself in the butt and really pushing yourself to be active in your growth and in your learning. And it's good to find friends to help you do it, and it's good to be a part of a community that could potentially, influence you for the good. But to do that without being really cognizant of what it's doing to you, how it's affecting your relationship with art, is a recipe for disaster. One that I hope no one really has to deal with. Because I think there's nothing sadder than seeing someone who, got into grind culture because they wanted to get better at art. It's something that they genuinely want to be improving, only to be so into it that the last thing they want to do is draw every day. The last thing they want to do is make art. All they do is joke about how awful it is, how much they hate it. But they still do it every day. It's like, why? Why are you doing something that you hate? If you've done it for so long and you're getting to a point where all you associate with art is just this awful, gut-wrenching feeling of self-loathing and punishment, why are you doing it anyway? Like, this is gonna be your career. You might as well not hate it. At least try in some way to find or reconnect with what it is about art that you enjoyed. And learn through that method. Learn through doing something that you might actually be okay with doing often, as opposed to, you know, sticking to a regimen that someone else created for you under the guise that it worked for them. Why wouldn't it work for you? I don't know. It's just, I feel like I've never really seen the benefits of it outside of people that I think have a good head on their shoulders about how to properly treat the process of grinding without killing themselves in the process. So, there you go. I am playing the lo-fi hip-hop music, beats to relax and study to by the Lo-Fi Girl Spotify channel. It is a very nice playlist. They update it every week or so, so I have new music to play for you guys. Said you worked in the industry. Where was it at? So I worked at a variety of places, mostly for freelance. I have predominantly worked at a lot of for indie games, doing illustration for bigger stuff like I've worked for Valve and Ubisoft. I've done character designs for some indie games, like I think Greg Gretzky has been my most consistent one. They make a lot of visual novel games. I'm currently working at a work-for-hire game studio. We're making a couple things that have not yet been released. And I've done on and off work for a bunch of other places as well. But a lot of my work in the past has been for illustration as opposed to design, which has been my current thing. tattoos, glasses. How did most of the work happen? Did you see your portfolio? Did the offer come to you? So I often was working on other stuff when I got most of the offers. I'd say most of the offers came to me, but that was also because I wasn't really looking at the time. I was still in school, so when I wasn't working, I was doing homework, and other stuff. So I wasn't really much of an active searcher for those things. It's kind of difficult for freelance illustrators. Like, those jobs, especially if you are a solo person, don't often have openings like a traditional job or a traditional position somewhere. They might, I think more often nowadays, especially with the whole push to working from home, I think a lot of them are starting to like have a lot more positions open for full-time freelance contract artists for companies. It's a really popular way to try out an artist before you hire them on full-time. But yeah, a lot of my previous work was done through offers. Have you ever felt like the work has damaged your relationship with art? If so, what have you done to feel better? Yeah, I have. What have I done to feel better? It takes time. It's difficult to heal from because, it's hard to find the time to do it, which is why I think a lot of people end up getting really burnt out. And it usually, like, I feel like I'm kind of in a bit of a burnout stage right now. And I think it really is just taking the time to listen to myself. Like, if I feel like I don't want to be drawing outside of work, then I won't push myself to do it, and instead I'll just spend time looking at art from other people. I'll take more time to just like be inspired and really enjoy what I'm looking at, because I like looking at art. I really like, looking at what other artists are doing and being inspired by other people's ideas, what they do in their own time. And oftentimes that might encourage me to come back to drawing and do it in a way that's, for me. Otherwise, sometimes just taking a break and not thinking about art is what I really need. And so I will get into other things. Like, I have picked up building Evangelion model kits, or I've been binge watching Criminal Minds again, or playing Animal Crossing, like things to take my mind away from art so that sometime in the future I can come back and I'll actually miss it. It's like when you spend a lot of time with someone and you kind of need time away from them to really learn to miss them. That's sometimes how it is with art, and that's okay. Did you receive your offers via email or social media? Which platform? Both. I think more often than not, more official offers will come from go through my email, although I also have my website that occasionally offers will come in through, because oftentimes you never know where they're gonna see your stuff, and they will usually just try to contact you whichever way. I've had people contact me on social media and then we moved to email. either straight via email or through someone who knows them, who's like, hey, I have this person that really wants to contact you. Is there some place like your email that they can reach you at? Or on my website, if they were looking at my portfolio, I have a contact page. So there's that. If you're someone looking for work, make sure that your contact is super easy to find. Don't clutter your bio with a bunch of like other links to stuff. A link tree is pretty helpful, but sometimes older recruiters don't know what to do with a link tree. So I found that just like a contact page on my website, linking my website everywhere, putting my email that I use for specifically just work stuff, that's easy to remember and easy to type and find, has served me the best. I forgot his glasses! I didn't mean to do just this one. I was gonna do more. But I am slow. Slow and tired. I'll tease myself for you. You are free to come at me for cheating. Do I use an iPad? If yes, which one do I recommend? I do use an iPad. I have the slightly smaller one, I think 11-inch. I'm debating whether or not I want to get a 12-inch. I don't know. Some people have said that it is nicer. I've gotten used to drawing on my iPad, though I mainly only sketch with it. So I don't know if the bigger screen is actually better, because I could always give the one that I currently have to my parents, which will be an upgrade for them regardless, and just get the 12-inch one, but I don't know. I don't know if I should. actually have... It just kind of hangs. I don't actually know if it goes anywhere. I think it doesn't. How did you learn to properly set your rates as a freelancer? I set them based on who my clients were. So if I felt like I was getting a decent amount of consistent work, I would set my prices. That's when I set my prices at what is like bare minimum for professional artists, which is at least $35 an hour. And then as I started getting clients that I felt like were a little bit more like high tier, like with Valve, that was the first time I set my rate to the highest it's ever been, which was $75 an hour. Often people will recommend you set day rates, but that's often for pretty experienced freelancers, and I haven't gotten to that point yet. But essentially, I based it off of who I was getting work from, and then also how often I was getting work. Because even if you don't get work from super high-level AAA companies, even if you're getting work really frequently, that means enough people are interested in buying your stuff that you have total right, and in fact, you should price yourself higher at that point. So every time you feel like you've gotten a good amount of consistent work, you should always be raising your prices incrementally. Usually for me, that means raising my prices to be like a new hourly rate that I then extrapolate into flat prices or a daily rate or something like that. I think, you know, I also modulate my prices depending on the company. So if I feel like this company has a lot of money, a lot of funding, or a lot of potential behind it, and they could potentially pay a higher rate, I give them a higher rate. If I think if it's an indie company, they don't have a ton of budget, or it's someone with a personal thing, but I still really want to do the project, I'll set my rate lower so that I'll still work on the project for less pay, but it's something I really care about, I really want to work on, so I'm a little bit more okay doing that kind of stuff. If it's for... There's a thing called the asshole tax. If you don't like the project, but you really need to take it because you really need the money, or you don't need to take it, but the money's kind of good, you can raise the prices for a client that you might not be super jazzed by, just to get the money. It's something that people do. Raise your prices if you know, you might as well, right? But yeah, so that's kind of how I have priced myself. I started out with personal commissions, so doing super casual stuff for people, not commercial at all. When I was doing that kind of stuff, I did at least $20 an hour. But I never really went above that. And then once I started working professional stuff, which I usually counted through, did I have to sign an NDA? Then I started raising my prices up to above at least $35 an hour. I'd say if a client really wants you, they're gonna say, hey, can we negotiate on that? And if you're really scared about it, you can always say, hey, I'm always willing to negotiate. But here is an insert slightly higher than you think they'll accept, because you never know. I was extremely scared, like, even though it was fucking Valve, like, I was still kind of scared. I was like, are they not gonna want to, like, pay me that much? Because, like, maybe they don't think I'm good enough to be paid that much. But, like, what they were asking me at the time, and given the circumstances of the assignment, they were like, yes, sure, yeah, we can do that. And that kind of gave me the confidence to then start asking that price for other projects, and so far, no one that I've asked that price for has turned me down. So it ultimately is kind of faking it till you make it, but if you are nervous about someone turning you down for a price, just say you're always happy to negotiate, just have them let you know. And if they do have a price in mind, sometimes they'll just come out and say it. Sometimes they'll wait for you to set one before they, like, highball or lowball you. Never let a client assume your prices, and also always make sure you talk about prices ahead of time. you can really learn a lot about a client depending on how willing they are to talk about how much they're going to pay you. And honestly, just like, it's always worth slightly highballing than lowballing yourself, because a client will never argue to pay you more. They're always going to try and pay less for your services. It's not necessarily a bad thing. They're not trying to be terrible people. It's just that it's business. The less they have to pay for the same amount of goods, the same quality goods, the better. But as an artist, you have to advocate for yourself and try to get those higher prices when you can. So always highball yourself a little bit. Never go under $35 an hour for professional stuff, especially for things that require you to sign a contract or NDA. And make sure you're very clear about your rates. Make sure you read through the contract. If there's an exclusivity clause in a contract, you best have made sure that you asked for a decent price for that, because that can get kind of expensive. Exclusivity contracts prevent you from working on anything other than that person's project unless they give you explicit permission. And if you are a career freelancer, that can get pretty expensive. Especially if that's how you make your living. So keep an eye out for stuff like that. Do I ever charge per project instead of an hourly rate? So yeah, I tend to save things like flat rates for projects that are smaller, more achievable. When it comes to hourly rate, I tend to save that for things that they are difficult to price because the tasks are a little bit amorphous. Like, I'm not sure what they're going to be. Like, for the Dota 2 contract that I did, they asked me to do 2 original illustrations and they added on a 3rd. There was no way for me to actually tell how long it was going to take me to make those illustrations, so it went with an hourly rate and I tracked my hours. For things where they're like, hey, just make 1 illustration, here's the guidelines for what we want, it's super easy, super standard, then I will potentially give them like a flat rate of like, okay, so I kind of know how long it's going to take me, and it's, relatively achievable, I don't have to think too hard about it, here's a flat rate price. Same for, more personal commissions. If it's just some guy on Twitter, you don't have to worry about hourly stuff. But if it's a company, hourly or daily rates is typically how they go. Professional freelancers will usually tell you to go not hourly, they'll tell you to go daily. So that's your hourly rate multiplied by 8. Because if you want to get paid kind of like it's a job, like an actual paying job, you want to be paid for a full day's worth of work, especially if you're being asked to be a full-time freelancer. So they recommend charging daily as opposed to hourly. That way, it ultimately depends on how long it takes you to finish the project, and that will determine how long or how much they pay you. Hold on, give me a sec. I will be right back, and then I will answer all of your questions. Okay, I'm back. I'm new here, but can I ask, how do you export from Photoshop and posting on Instagram without losing quality? Instagram, for being a photos platform, is extremely awful for posting high quality photos. I'd say export the file. I think a lot of the resolution loss comes from downsizing, so don't upload like a super huge file. Make it like a size where when you look at it, it's not losing a ton of quality, but don't choose. I tend to draw things at like obscene sizes, like 30 inches by 30 inches. Don't do that. If you are zooming on stuff, like if you're doing close-ups, only like save out the close-ups as opposed to zooming in on the actual Instagram editor. That zoom in is gonna destroy the quality a lot. Even if you do it in like the Photos app or something like that. Just save out the image in the close-up size that you want, and then just hope to God it works, because Instagram's got a really awful uploading quality. So what exactly could they negotiate besides price to get you on board with the project? Some will talk about giving you creative control. Some might talk about, I don't know, they might talk about credits being something, like better. Honestly, in my experience, most people really only negotiate price. Like, especially if you're a freelancer, they only really want to be talking to you for your skills and expertise. They're not really there to negotiate much else, and they're there to get something done. So, for the most part, a lot of negotiations I've had have just been with price. Like, hey, we're a super small studio, we can't really afford that, would you be willing to work for this? Or, like, hey, if I haven't really done a daily rate, but say you gave them a daily rate of something and they're like, okay, so we need this done in like X amount of weeks, could you do that? This would be how much we'd pay, given the rate, like blah blah blah. So I don't know, I'd say most of my negotiations have been about price exclusively. Esada, thank you for the tier 1 sub. Thank you. How to make a brush that outlines itself. So it's not the brush, it's the layer. So there is a thing called effects. If you double click, it's called layer styles in Photoshop. Let me show. Let's see. Okay, so here's what is actually on my screen. You guys don't see this typically because I am usually not displaying my screen. I'm capturing Photoshop. So Photoshop, when you do that, doesn't show dialog options. But if you double click on a layer, it'll bring up layer styles. You can set a stroke, and then you can increase, decrease the stroke size. I set it to something that is very similar to my line weight, and it simulates line work. It's not the cleanest. At higher resolutions, it looks pretty, like you can even see it's not really quite the same, but really excellent for stuff that you can't be bothered to line art ahead of time, like glasses. I think like 2 pixels. Hey Sunburns, how are you doing? Make sure they're offering you more than just profit shares. That's usually a way for a company to, at least in America, it's a way for a company to not pay you while promising to pay you. As long as you're getting more than just those shares, then that's good. Let's call this done. And then I will work on one more for tonight. Oops. No. How do you get more income while being a freelancer? Most people will say that a good freelancer will have multiple streams of income. That's why you see a lot of people get into making YouTube videos, getting into doing Gumroad tutorials, arts education, they make online classes, they get into Patreon, they make books, they do streaming. Like, alternate streams of revenue that are passive is usually how people increase their freelancer revenue so that they have a set amount that they can reliably make, and then any jobs they take on is extra. Well, rather, it's usually that the jobs they take on are the main thing, the passive is the extra. But the idea is that you want to have a consistent stream of income that doesn't require active effort while you're doing stuff actively, so that you have 2 streams, multiple streams of income coming in at the same time. You get a solid income regardless of what jobs you get at what time, because there are times where you don't get paid until the end of a project. There are times that you might, like, basically you might not really be seeing any of the money until they're totally fine with it, until they're totally cool with it. Sometimes you get paid regularly, sometimes you get paid at a certain billing period at the end of an assignment. You never know. So being a freelancer can be pretty nerve-wracking sometimes if you don't have like a good flow going on. And that's where passive streams of income tend to come in pretty handy. Hey Angel, how are you? I will get up and stretch. Wait. Hello, Piggy. Where do I live? I live in Southern California. Hey, Jonah. too far away for me to pet. What do I think about NFTs? I do not support them, but I will also not participate in torching people who do. There's a difference between collectible NFTs and people making NFTs out of their own art. If it's their own art, their own property, their own work, they're free to monetize it however they want. Ultimately, it's just another way of doing it. I am very critical of people that get into collectible NFTs, which is where people get all those icons from. But otherwise, they do what they want to do with their own money. I think blockchain technology is pretty interesting. It is extremely expensive currently, but an interesting one with a lot of applications. Potentially has some pretty decent applications when it comes to games, but again, pretty expensive resource-wise and not entirely efficient just yet. So there's still work to be done in that space. Do I ever use the eraser in the back of the stylus? I don't have the hand dexterity to like quickly flip the pen to use the eraser and then flip it back at the speed that I want to. So I just have a button that lets me quickly hotkey to the eraser and then hotkey back to the pen. If I was any more patient, which is funny considering a previous conversation we had today, I would probably use it because it's quite convenient and I can map this button to something else, but I am not patient. I need to not interrupt my train of thought, and stopping to use the eraser and then stopping to go back to the pen is extremely distracting, so I don't do it. Do I have a favorite character in Naruto? Do I? I haven't thought about Naruto in a really long time. I liked Gaara and I liked one of the teachers, but I don't remember what his name is. I liked a lot of the side characters. I like obviously I liked the main characters, but I kind of fell out of Naruto before it ended, so I didn't really get to see where all other arcs went. And a lot of the side characters, I don't know, I just thought were nice. They were cute. I don't remember. I remember shockingly little about Naruto. When you mirror or flip the image back and forth, what does it do? I flip it because I'm really bad at keeping things symmetrical and in line with each other. So I often flip it back and forth so I can check symmetry and also just to see it from a new perspective. I find that it helps me keep a much more, I guess, like overall view of the piece instead of like getting super into my head about what it looks like from one angle. It's like kind of why some people will flip their drawings upside down to see if it looks weird. Often it does because, you know, it's a totally new perspective. Doesn't necessarily mean that if it's right, it should look good from looking upside, like being upside down, but I don't know. Sometimes just a change of perspective is it's nice. It's nice to have. No, I use the image rotation. So, if you go to here, if you go to image rotation, flip canvas horizontal, I have set it to Control H. That is the one that I use. Have you watched Hunter x Hunter? Do you want to see the ending to the series? Yes, Hunter x Hunter is one of my favorite series. I have not kept up with it, and I don't know if I want to see how it ends. I hope it ends well, and I hope it does end. I really do. But I think I read the manga a long time ago. Basically, like, I stopped around the, like, third or fourth half of the political arc, and then I read a little bit after that. But, I rewatch the anime, like, every year. And I always stop right before the Chimera Ant arc, because I can't do that again. I watched the Chimera Ant arc once. It was enough for me. I don't like it. I don't like the arc. I can't do it. So, yeah. But I really like it. I really like the series. I've watched it every year, sometimes multiple times a year. I love Hunter x Hunter. But it is, I think, a little overcooked. I think it needs to finish at some point. It's been going on for a while. It's quite a few arcs past now. I will drink my boba. I think I have in the past. Nope. Other than the character reference. But the pose I am making up as I go. Hey, Fallen. Do you think artists need to learn basic physics for painting realistically? For example, light is ravaged, I'd say that artists should be inquisitive about science and history and all those other things, but you don't necessarily need to understand it to that degree. I think you can have a working knowledge of those topics and be just fine, or really understand it and have a really robust kind of knowledge about the physics of light. But I think you can also just get away with knowing what light looks like in certain situations. And when you don't understand it, you look for reference. much time did it roughly take to learn anatomy? You know that you can draw a pose without reference. Well, I think people have done it much faster than I have, but I've been drawing for about 20 years at this point. 21 years? I think we've reached 21 years. So you tell me. I think I'm still very at the beginnings of drawing without reference. I think there is a lot left for me to become comfortable with, and I am faced with the realities of my failings every day. But this is how I typically draw. Hey Faye! Welcome, welcome. I might have made my vocabulary mistake. I mean, like, you knew anatomy, you can understand and remember muscles, bone to try and draw a name. I'd say that takes... I mean, you could really just, if you wanted to kind of just, like, work through it, you could learn that in about a couple months. Like, it does not take that long to learn those things. It's the application of those of that knowledge, that takes the most amount of time. In fact, you could probably learn that in like 2 weeks. I never had an internship. Yeah, I mean, it's like learning anything at school, right? It's information. How do you best internalize information, not just regurgitate it for a test, but actually fully understand it and know it inside and out to the point where you can use it as a building block for, you know, something bigger, more complicated, more complex. That's the whole point. What's your favorite thing to draw? Cute girls. Cute witch girls. And their cats. It almost always ends up looking like me. I think just because my favorite character to draw is just the character I end up looking like. I grew into her, and now it just feels very narcissistic. But I like drawing her, so who cares? Have I read Witch Hat Atelier? Absolutely I have. It is a fantastic series made by a lovely, lovely artist. I love Witch Hat Atelier. I don't really draw cat girls very much. I'm ambivalent to them. I draw them just as much as any other kind of character, I guess. Chat asks a lot of questions, but do you want to ask chat anything? I mean, I always start off the streams by asking how everyone's doing. And especially for people who come around all the time, like, it's really nice getting updates on their life. So if chat wants to tell me anything cool or fun or interesting or nice, they're always free to do so. This is the same brush you used for your previous headshot. Yes, I've been using the same brush. I tend to do that. Like, I'll pick a brush at the beginning of a stream, and then I'll just keep using it. Bye-bye. Thank you for coming. I hope I can see you around more often. Have I watched Little Witch Academia? Yes, I have. I love Little Witch Academia. Specifically, I like the movies because it felt much more, you know, Yo Yoshinari I think had a lot more to do and a lot more power over how that show went, or how that movie went, and so... And I love Yo Yoshinari. He's the reason why I watched it. So Anything where I feel like he has the most amount of creative control is the version of it that I like. Ate a chocolate rum cake. It was super good. Nice. I feel like I've never really had anything that had like alcohol in it as a part of the ingredients, so I'm very interested to try it, although it probably couldn't be chocolate because I don't like chocolate. I'm glad I can be helpful. I am always very grateful to hear from people that they find my long rambles helpful in some way. Makes it worth it. Chocolate is a mass conspiracy. In this essay, I will discuss how the chocolate industry has somehow convinced people that their product is actually worth forking over money for, and how America has somehow influenced the average consumer that the chocolate they eat is actually quite good, despite the fact that it is made with overly ripe, potentially extremely fermented milk. It is made with terrible ingredients, therefore chocolate tastes bad. In this essay, I'll prove it. So I've heard that like European chocolate tastes better, as well as Japanese chocolate. I've never had European chocolate, so I can't say, but I generally don't like most American chocolate products except for hot chocolate, which is just cocoa powder and milk. And occasionally choco pies, chocolate strawberries, the occasional. It's like half chocolate, half something else. Otherwise, all nasty. That's even worse. Dark chocolate? How dare you present me with food items that are not containing, or that do not contain the drug that I am addicted to, which is sugar. The blasphemy. I'm an American, don't you know? What kind of sweets do I like? Sour candy, oftentimes. Fruit candy. So I like sour Skittles. I like sour belts. Sour gummies. That kind of stuff. Does your back hurt or your neck hurt when you draw for a long time? Yes, absolutely. I have many a joint back muscle not problem. Canadian? Unfortunately, no. I am a American through and through. That's because sour Skittles are actually good candy. Fight me. Tojo, meet me in the back of the schoolyard. I've got some words for you. What will happen once these 80 commissions are done? I'm gonna take a big old break. And then I'm gonna draw whatever I want to draw. And by big old break, I mean I might just skip a stream. Yeah, and it's taking a while because I only work on these when I stream. So they're taking quite a while. And I also took a break from streaming for a couple months this year. So I am quite behind. But I will work on them until they are done. Thankfully, everyone has been very kind and nice and waiting very patiently, so we'll get these done in a timely, well, not timely, but they'll get done. Thank you, thank you. Random question, but how do you keep doing personal projects if they just keep getting backtracked? It feels frustrating. It is frustrating, and I haven't really done a personal project in about a year and a half. And it is pretty unfortunate. It happens a lot when I'm working, when I get into a state of just constantly doing stuff. Which is why, you know, when people ask me, like, oh, I'm in school now, how do I get into commissions, and how do I work, and how do I do all this stuff, like, appreciate the time that you do have to work on things that you want to do. And if you're a student, you're in college or in high school, and you have the time to be making projects based on things you want to be doing, like if you're an aspiring animator, like start learning those skills and start trying to make your own films, even if they turn out bad. If you're an aspiring comic artist, like go and write like that one-off comic and make it. You know, even if it doesn't turn out looking as nice as you wanted it to be. If you're a character designer, design characters, actually get into the act of doing it and make your own personal projects, because once you start working, once you start making money, once you start doing commissions and freelance work and trying to network and get, you know, more gigs and stuff, like there's just no time for your own things. And honestly, I think most of my development as an artist has come from the times that I've been able to do my own stuff and like the times I've been able to do my own projects. So the past year and a half has felt like a super big stagnation for me. And it kind of sucks. But you know, it's kind of why I'm motivated to work through my stuff and get to a point where I can take a break. And I'm an adult now, and I've learned, which means that I am trying actively to make sure that I have a break soon and not work as much. How many ideas do you have in that noggin? It's not so much ideas as just stuff I want to try out. Like, I have ideas, but I'm not really much of like a, I don't know, a super big concept person. Like, I think I just have soft things I want to draw. I'm much more of a person that just enjoys drawing as opposed to someone with a lot of really strong ideas I want to execute. So I just want the time to really get into drawing again. But if I'm gonna be honest, I've been pretty tired recently. And when I get off work, I often don't really want to draw. So I'm trying to give myself time to do that as well and do other stuff. But there are times where I'm at work and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I didn't take the time to draw over the weekend. I just played a bunch of Animal Crossing. Have I dealt with imposter syndrome? Yeah. All the time. Yeah, I mean, it's really easy to burn out in college. Like, with the workload that you get when you're in college, you're essentially working like, you know, each class is like a full-time job. Like, you've got assignments due every week, even if you only have class like once a week. You know, it's the workload for 5 classes. It's a lot of stuff, and you do that for a whole semester, and no, it's really easy to get burned out by that. Are you selling your current brushes, or is it the same with the old one? All the brushes I'm currently using are the ones that are currently being offered on my Gumroad. Or if you're a sub. How much work does a person get in a professional job? Is it way worse than art school or better? I'd say it's better. Like, professional jobs, you're usually only getting maybe 1 or 2 assignments a week. And you just have to like update daily. They're a lot less about like, you know, work, and then just turn it in on the day. You know, you're usually always updating your team about stuff or sending updates to the client. Like, it's really not the same. The thing about school is, like, it's really honestly just meant to teach you to learn how to multitask and learn how to manage your time. You get a trial run every year on like how well can you sustain a consistent or even problem solve and basically on the fly accommodate for a changing schedule or move your schedule around so that you can still get your homework done on time, still go to class on time, and yet still do stuff in your free time, you know? It's good for teaching you what ways you best work under stress, like what maybe stress management skills, maybe, you know, what are the best ways that you focus, or you know, techniques to get yourself through really stressful weeks. I didn't used to like make lists or plan out my days before I realized that it really helped me when I was going through like a super stressful week in school. Like being able to just list out a straight to-do list of like, okay, here's Monday through Friday, here's the dates for everything, so now I need to know when things need to be done before so I can like schedule out my week, even if it was micromanaging my time so that I can get everything done. Those are skills I still use today, and those are the skills that you learn in college because you're always pushed to, you know, be constantly working and constantly be in this state of, you know, either stress or managing your time. But when it comes to how it works in like the professional sphere, you don't normally get that much work ever. Am I using a ref for this drawing? I am only using the character outfit reference. I don't know if there's a name for it. I think it's just considered semi-realism. But I think at this point a lot of people just call me an anime artist. art school, any tips on finding time for yourself, time management, I suppose? So when you're picking your class schedule, like, try to make sure that you have a day that you have free for being able to just work or even potentially have a break. That's if you can choose your schedule. If not, look for days where you can really just front load working on homework. Like, know what days you should be working on a certain class, and block out those days as being ones where you're trying to get ahead of the work, or you try to just do your time getting that bit done, so you can at least say that you put some time into it. And then look at the time you have left and see what time can you mark out as being, okay, I want to have everything done by this time so that I have this day or this half of the day free. I think that's a really important skill to have, because a lot about working freelance, especially if you get into it, is knowing how to manage your own time. And I was always really bad at it, because anytime I wasn't working, I was probably sleeping or eating, and I didn't know how to manage my time so that I had breaks. And so my burnouts were pretty long and pretty consistent. So I'd say take a full stock of your schedule, plan out the days that you really end up needing to do homework and getting your stuff done on time, and then give yourself the agency to make a decision about not having a super heavy course load every other semester, or having weekends completely free of schoolwork, that kind of stuff. It's really just about, and obviously this all changes as you get into the school year. You start realizing what the cadence is for homework and classes and stuff. Once that's all figured out, you can start making more informed decisions about your schedule, but really it's just like, knowing when you need a break, knowing how to take a break, and then knowing, what time you need to get homework done. As the school year goes on, you tend to have a better idea of that stuff, but it's good to think about it ahead of time. Like, I decided in high school, like, eating, I was not gonna work while I was eating. If I was gonna eat, I was gonna stop working, I was gonna remove myself from my desk, and I was gonna eat and enjoy eating. And then, that was my sanctuary time. I was not gonna work. I was gonna chill, and I would use that to break up homework. I would, if at school, at SCAD at least, because when I went to LCAD, I lived relatively close to the campus, so I could just kind of go back to the apartment. But with SCAD, when I was going there, and I was doing homework or I was in classes, I'd know specific places I could go out, so I had a change of scenery, a change of pace, and then I would, allow myself to be in that different headspace, and then I'd go back and I'd be productive, and then, I would take another break when I figured I'd been working for a couple hours. So it's all about knowing what you need as a person to get stuff done. And when you feel like you're really unproductive one day, it's all about accommodating that. It's like, okay, if I don't get this much done today, how much do I need to get done tomorrow or the day after if I take a break now, all that kind of stuff. The more willing you are to accommodate and problem solve on the fly, the easier everything will be for you in the future. This is it. Hope it is. Okay. Oh, he has tassels. These are too big. I know guys are supposed to have larger feet, but I can never draw them with larger feet. It always looks wrong. Okay, I think I will call it there. But yeah, thank you to everyone who stuck around. This was a pretty long one. Yes. Oh, damn. I did it again. I drew it on the wrong side. I did it again. But yeah. I might fix that off stream. Oh, the chibi's updated in the folder. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, and thank you for your questions. Thank you for being so kind, and as always, I love you all so very much. I will see you hopefully next Friday. I don't think anything's happening then. And as always, stay safe for me, stay healthy, stay happy. I love you all so very much. Take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones. I look forward to hearing how you guys are next week. And, you know, always feel free to pop in and say hi. You don't have to feel pressured to chat if you don't want to. You can just hang out with us. It's always cool. But yeah, thank you all so much. I love you, and I will see you next week.